I am Harper Wilson, 32, a Boston interior designer who grew up in the shadow of my younger sister Brooke. Throughout our childhood, she was always the golden child, the favorite who could do no wrong. When Brooke vandalized my newly renovated Victorian home out of pure jealousy, I expected my parents to finally see the truth. Instead, they defended her despite video evidence. That day, I decided enough was enough. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to see how I finally exposed my sister's true nature. Growing up in our pristine colonial house in Greenwich, Connecticut, I learned early on that there were different rules for Brooke and me. My parents, Richard and Catherine Wilson, weren't bad people. They were successful, hardworking professionals who provided us with comfortable lives. Dad ran his own accounting firm while Mom worked as a pediatrician. From the outside, we appeared to be the perfect American family. But within our household walls, the favoritism was painfully obvious. The pattern started when Brooke was born when I was 4. I still remember the day they brought her home, wrapped in a pink blanket with a tiny bow headband. "This is your sister," Mom had said, "and you need to always look out for her." That responsibility became a one-way street that defined our relationship for decades. My earliest memory of the favoritism was my 7th birthday. I'd been promised a special party with a magician since I'd been talking about magic for months. The day before my birthday, Brooke, then 3, came down with a mild cold. Nothing serious, just a runny nose and slight fever. My birthday was immediately downgraded to cake at home with just our family. No friends, no magician. Mom spent the day nursing Brooke while Dad half-heartedly sang happy birthday before returning to work in his home office. Contrast that with Brooke's birthdays, which were always extravagant affairs regardless of circumstances. When I had the flu during her 5th birthday, Mom hired a babysitter to keep me in my room so I wouldn't ruin Brooke's special day. I watched through my bedroom window as pony rides and clowns entertained 20 screaming children in our backyard. School achievements followed the same pattern. My straight A's were expected, met with casual nods and quick good jobs. When I won the state science fair in 8th grade, Dad couldn't attend because Brooke had a soccer game where she mostly sat on the bench. Mom showed up for the last 10 minutes of my award ceremony, apologizing that Brooke needed her support at practice. Meanwhile, Brooke's C+ in math was celebrated with ice cream because she tried so hard. Her participation trophy for coming in last at a swim meet warranted a special dinner where my parents toasted her perseverance. When she was cast as tree number 3 in the school play, they sent flowers and took dozens of photos, while my lead role in the high school musical received a "sorry we couldn't make it, but we're sure you did fine." The college years made the division even more stark. Despite my excellent grades and extracurriculars, my parents informed me they could only contribute minimally to my education. "We need to save for Brooke's future too," they explained. I worked 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a full course load at Boston University, graduating with honors and $40,000 in student loans. Brooke, on the other hand, attended 5 different colleges over 6 years, changing majors each time she found the coursework too stressful. My parents funded every switch, every apartment, every car. When she dropped out for the final time at 24, they called it finding her path and bought her a condo as a fresh start. Through it all, I tried to maintain a relationship with my family. I called weekly, visited on holidays, and never directly confronted the disparity in how we were treated. I told myself that family was family, and that one day they would see my value. My best friend Megan witnessed this dynamic from the time we met in 3rd grade. "Your parents are blind when it comes to your sister," she would say. "It's like they live in an alternate reality." Megan was particularly incensed when my parents forgot to call on my college graduation day because they were helping Brooke move to yet another apartment after she'd been fired from another job. It was Megan who took me out to celebrate, Megan who helped me find my first apartment, Megan, who encouraged me to pursue my passion for interior design despite my parents' lukewarm response to my career choice. You can build your own life, she told me. One where you're valued for exactly who you are. And slowly, that's exactly what I did. After college, I secured an entry-level position at a small but respected design firm in Boston. While the pay was minimal, the experience was invaluable. I spent 3 years absorbing everything I could, working nights and weekends to prove myself. My boss, Eleanor, became the mentor I'd always craved, someone who recognized my talent and pushed me to develop it further. You have an eye for spaces that can't be taught, she told me during my second year. You don't just see rooms, you see possibilities. By 27, I had saved enough to start my own business, Harper Wilson Interiors. The first 2 years were challenging, filled with small jobs and tight budgets, but I built a reputation for transforming spaces with creative solutions that didn't require massive budgets. A feature in Boston Home magazine brought in wealthier clients, and suddenly my business was thriving. At 30, I achieved what had once seemed impossible. I purchased my own home. A neglected Victorian in a desirable neighborhood that needed significant renovation. The house was a disaster, with peeling wallpaper, outdated plumbing, and floors that sagged in the middle. But I saw its potential immediately. This would be my masterpiece, a showcase of my design philosophy and personal style. For 18 months, I poured every spare dollar and minute into the renovation. I knocked down walls to create an open floor plan downstairs while preserving the original architectural details. I restored the ornate crown molding and refinished the hardwood floors. The kitchen was completely modernized with custom cabinets I designed myself. Each bathroom was transformed into a spa-like retreat. Every color, texture, and fixture was carefully selected to honor the home's history while making it functional for modern living. As my house and business flourished, Brooke's life continued its pattern of false starts and failures. She cycled through retail jobs and administrative positions, never lasting more than a few months at each. She moved back in with our parents twice during this period, each time with a dramatic story about unreasonable bosses or toxic workplaces. The monthly family dinners I still dutifully attended became increasingly tense as my success grew more difficult to ignore. One particularly memorable evening occurred just after I'd secured a contract to design the interior of a new luxury hotel in downtown Boston, my largest project to date. "I've got some exciting news," I said as we sat down to eat. "I won the bid for the Archer Hotel downtown. It's a huge opportunity." Mom nodded vaguely. "That's nice, dear. Did you hear that Brooke has an interview at the mall next week? For an assistant manager position." "Assistant to the manager," Brooke corrected, though the distinction didn't dampen my parents' enthusiasm. "It's a foot in the door to retail management," Dad said proudly. They only interviewed 5 people for the position. The conversation continued in this vein for 20 minutes, dissecting every detail of Brooke's upcoming interview while my career milestone was left unexplored. When dessert was served, Brooke suddenly remembered my news. "So this hotel thing, is it like picking out pillows and stuff?" "It's a bit more involved," I explained, trying to keep the edge from my voice. "I'll be designing all the public spaces and creating room templates for the entire hotel. It's a 7-figure contract." The table fell silent. Brooke's face darkened. "Well, aren't you special?" she muttered. "Some of us have to work real jobs, you know." "Interior design is a real job," I replied calmly. "I've worked very hard to get where I am." "Oh, please," Brooke scoffed. "You've always been so full of yourself. Playing with fabric swatches isn't exactly saving lives." Rather than defending me, Mom quickly changed the subject while Dad refilled Brooke's wine glass. The pattern was so familiar it was almost comical. As my house renovation neared completion and my business continued to thrive, Brooke's jealousy intensified. At another family dinner, she accidentally spilled red wine all over the fabric samples I had brought to show my parents. when I was featured in a local magazine. She told mutual acquaintances that I had slept my way into the article. At my cousin's wedding, she created a scene when several relatives asked about my recent projects instead of focusing on her new haircut. Through it all, my parents remained firmly in her corner, making excuses for her behavior and suggesting I was provoking her by flaunting my success. During this time, I met Jason, an architect who often collaborated with my firm. Unlike my family, he celebrated my achievements and understood the work that went into them. After 6 months of dating, I finally introduced him to my parents, only to have Brooke monopolize the entire dinner with a dramatic story about her latest workplace injustice. Later that night, Jason asked the question that had been on Megan's lips for years. Why do you keep subjecting yourself to this? They clearly don't appreciate you. They're my family, I said, the answer sounding hollow even to me. Family should lift you up, not tear you down, he replied. You deserve better than this. Deep down, I knew he was right. But decades of conditioning are hard to break, and some part of me still hoped that one day my parents would see me clearly. That hope was about to be shattered completely. After 18 months of renovation, my Victorian was finally complete. Every room was a testament to my vision and hard work. The transformation was so dramatic that Architectural Digest had scheduled a photo shoot for the following month. To celebrate, I decided to host a small housewarming party for close friends, colleagues, and family. I spent days preparing, planning a menu of elegant hors d'oeuvres and selecting wines that complemented the sophisticated atmosphere I'd created. Fresh flowers adorned every room, and subtle lighting highlighted the architectural features I'd painstakingly restored. The evening began perfectly. Megan arrived early to help with final preparations, and Jason greeted guests as they arrived. My mentor Eleanor brought a beautiful antique vase as a housewarming gift, and colleagues exclaimed over details like the custom millwork and the hand-painted ceiling medallion in the dining room. My parents arrived an hour into the party, offering a generic housewarming plant and cursory compliments before asking if Brooke had arrived yet. She hadn't been invited. After the scene at my cousin's wedding and multiple other incidents, I decided that my housewarming should be a drama-free celebration. I must have forgotten to send her invitation. I lied, not wanting to create tension. Mom frowned. You know how sensitive she is. She'll be devastated to be left out. Before I could respond, the front door banged open and Brooke stormed in, clearly intoxicated and furious. Nice party, sis, she slurred, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing tray. Fancy of you to invite me. Brooke, I said quietly, trying to guide her away from the main group of guests. This isn't a good time. Maybe we could have lunch tomorrow. She jerked away from my touch. Don't patronize me. You think you're so much better than everyone with your perfect house and perfect job. Some of us haven't had everything handed to us on a silver platter. The irony of her statement was staggering. Nearby conversations stuttered to a halt as guests tried to pretend they weren't witnessing the unfolding drama. Brooke, please, Mom intervened. You're upset. Let's go get some fresh air. No. I want to see the amazing house that Harper never shuts up about. I want to see what makes her so special. She pushed past me and began a loud, mocking tour of my home, pointing out features with exaggerated praise. Oh, look at this fancy light. And these special floors. God, it must be nice to have nothing better to do than obsess over paint colors. Dad stood by looking uncomfortable, but made no move to stop her. Jason started toward her, but I shook my head. Any intervention would only escalate the situation. After a mortifying 15 minutes, Brooke finally ran out of steam when she realized she wasn't getting the reaction she wanted. With a final glare at me, she grabbed her purse. This place isn't even that great. It's pretentious, just like you. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard that a picture frame fell from the wall and shattered. My parents followed her, Mom pausing only to say, you know how she gets. You shouldn't have excluded her. Somehow, I managed to salvage the evening, making self-deprecating jokes about family drama to ease the tension. By the time the last guest left around midnight, I was exhausted but relieved that the worst was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. I awoke the next morning to an unnaturally cold draft. Stumbling downstairs, I discovered the source. The beautiful bay window in my living room had been shattered, glass strewn across the hardwood floors I'd spent thousands restoring. But that was just the beginning. As I moved through the house in shock, I discovered scene after scene of destruction. My custom sofa had been slashed, the stuffing pulled out and scattered like snow. The antique Persian rug in the dining room was soaked with what smelled like bleach. In the kitchen, cabinet doors hung from broken hinges, and my grandmother's china lay in pieces on the floor. The walls of my home office, freshly painted in a shade of blue that had taken weeks to perfect, were now splattered with red wine. My design books and client portfolios had been torn apart, the pages floating in puddles of water from overturned vases. Upstairs, the master bathroom mirror bore a message scrawled in lipstick. Not so perfect now. The destruction was methodical and deeply personal, targeting the elements of my home that meant the most to me. This wasn't random vandalism. It was calculated to cause maximum pain. With shaking hands, I called the police, then Jason, then Megan. While waiting for them to arrive, I remembered the security system I'd installed during the renovation. The cameras covered the exterior of the house and the main entryway. When the police arrived, I showed them the footage. It clearly showed Brooke returning to my house around 3 a.m., using the spare key I'd once given my parents for emergencies. For over an hour, she moved purposefully through my home, destroying everything she touched. The final clip showed her staring directly into the camera with a satisfied smile before leaving. The responding officers were sympathetic but matter-of-fact. They took my statement, photographed the damage, and confirmed that the video would make for a straightforward case against Brooke. They estimated the damage at well over $100,000. "Would you like to press charges?" the officer asked. I hesitated, years of family conditioning making me pause despite the devastation surrounding me. "Let me think about it," I finally said. After they left, Jason and Megan helped me begin the heartbreaking process of documenting the damage for insurance. Every photograph felt like another wound. "You have to press charges," Megan insisted, carefully picking up shards of my grandmother's china. "This is criminal." "She's sick," I said, not sure why I was still making excuses. "She needs help." "What she needs is consequences," Jason countered. "This isn't a cry for help. It's a deliberate attack." Deep down, I knew they were right. But before making any decisions, I needed to talk to my parents. Surely now, with irrefutable evidence, they would finally acknowledge the truth about their younger daughter. I called them immediately, my voice breaking as I described the destruction. "I need you to come over," I said. "You need to see what Brooke did." Their response would change everything. My parents arrived 2 hours later, by which time Megan, Jason, and I had made minimal progress in cleaning up the destruction. The shock on their faces as they entered gave me a momentary hope that they would finally see the situation clearly. Mom covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, looking around at the wreckage of my living room. Dad shook his head slowly. "This is extensive." I led them through the house room by room, documenting each deliberate act of vandalism. The slashed furniture, the bleached rugs, the broken heirlooms, the lipstick message on the mirror. With each new scene of destruction, I waited for their anger, their outrage on my behalf. When we finished the tour, we gathered in the kitchen, the only room relatively intact apart from broken dishes. I pulled out my laptop and played the security footage. The video was undeniable. Brooke, methodically destroying my home with what appeared to be genuine pleasure. "I've filed a police report," I said after the video ended. "And I'll be submitting an insurance claim. but the deductible is $20,000. Not to mention the items that can't be replaced. I waited for their response, certain that the evidence was too overwhelming to deny. Mom sighed heavily and exchanged a glance with Dad. "Harper," she began carefully, "have you considered what you might have done to provoke this?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Provoke? Are you serious right now? "We know you excluded her from your party," Dad said. "That was very hurtful to her. So that justifies destroying my home? Are you hearing yourselves?" Mom reached for my hand, which I pulled away. "Sweetie, you know Brooke struggles with her emotions. She's always been more sensitive than you." "Sensitive?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "She caused over $100,000 in damage. She destroyed family heirlooms. She wrote threatening messages on my mirror. She was drinking," Dad offered, as if that explained everything. "She's been going through a tough time lately." "We're not saying what she did was right," Mom added quickly. "But you've always been jealous of the attention we give her." The accusation was so backwards that I actually laughed. "I've been jealous? Do you even hear yourselves? Your daughter is shown on video committing felony vandalism, and somehow I'm the problem." "There's no need to be dramatic," Dad said dismissively. "They're just things. Things can be replaced. What about my grandmother's china? The quilt she made me? Are those just things?" "This attitude isn't helping," Mom said. "If you'd been more understanding of Brooke's feelings over the years, perhaps this wouldn't have happened." I stared at them, finally seeing with perfect clarity the dynamic that had shaped my entire life. No matter what Brooke did, no matter how destructive or harmful, she would always be the victim in their eyes. And I would always be expected to understand, to forgive, to accommodate. "I'm pressing charges," I said quietly. This announcement jolted them from their complacency. "You can't be serious," Dad said. "She's your sister." "She's a 30-year-old woman who deliberately destroyed my home," I replied. "Actions have consequences. We'll pay for the damages," Mom offered quickly. "Whatever the insurance doesn't cover." "On one condition," Dad added. "You drop this nonsense about pressing charges." The bargain was so familiar. Protect Brooke from consequences in exchange for some token compensation. It had been the pattern my entire life, and they expected me to fall in line once again. "No," I said, the single word feeling like freedom. "This isn't about money. This is about Brooke taking responsibility for once in her life." "You've always been hard on her," Mom said, tears forming. "Always judging her for not being as perfect as you." The absurdity of this statement left me speechless. "I think you should leave," Jason said, stepping in as he saw me struggling. "Harper needs to deal with this situation without additional stress." "This is a family matter," Dad snapped. "It doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when you come into her destroyed home and blame her for it," Jason replied evenly. My parents gathered their things, Mom crying softly, Dad fuming silently. At the door, Mom turned back. "Please reconsider, Harper. This will tear the family apart." After they left, I collapsed onto a kitchen chair, emotionally drained. "I can't believe they're still defending her," Megan said, incredulous. "I can," I replied. "It's what they've always done." That evening, the texts started arriving from extended family members. Apparently, Brooke had shared her version of events, painting herself as the victim of my snobbery and provocation. According to her story, I had humiliated her at the party, and she had merely responded emotionally to my cruelty. Most shocking was that many relatives seemed to accept her version, despite the implausibility of her claims. Cousins I'd been close to suggested I should be the bigger person and consider Brooke's feelings. An aunt warned that family is forever and advised against legal action that would only cause more pain. As I sat surrounded by the wreckage of my home and my family relationships, I finally accepted what Jason and Megan had been telling me for years. This pattern would never change unless I changed my response to it. For 3 decades, I had accepted my role as the responsible one, the understanding one, the one who would always forgive and accommodate. I had hoped that eventually my parents would see the truth about their daughters. But the events of the past 24 hours had shattered that hope completely. It was time for a new approach. The next morning, I called the police and officially pressed charges against Brooke for breaking and entering, vandalism, and property destruction. The detective assigned to my case reviewed the security footage and assured me it was an open and shut case. Brooke would likely be arrested within days. Then I called my insurance company and submitted a claim for the damages, providing the police report number and offering the security footage as evidence. The claims adjuster whistled when I emailed him photos of the destruction. "This is personal," he observed. "Most vandalism is random, but this was targeted. It was my sister." I said, the words still painful to speak aloud. "Family situations are always the most difficult," he replied sympathetically. "We'll expedite your claim as much as possible." With those immediate tasks handled, I faced the daunting prospect of rebuilding my home and my life. The insurance money would eventually cover most of the physical damages, but the emotional toll was harder to quantify. At Jason's suggestion, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Amelia Foster, a therapist specializing in family trauma. During our first session, I shared the history of favoritism and the recent vandalism incident. Dr. Foster listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly letting me talk. "What you're describing," she said after I finished, "is a classic family dynamic called scapegoating. You've been cast in the role of the responsible, self-sufficient child, while your sister has been assigned the role of the fragile one needing protection. Your parents have invested so deeply in these narratives that they cannot see either of you clearly. So there's nothing I can do to change their perspective," I asked. "Changing others is rarely possible," she replied. "But changing how you respond to them, setting healthy boundaries, and addressing your own trauma from this dynamic, that is within your control." Over the next few weeks, as I worked with contractors to repair my home and with Dr. Foster to repair my sense of self, an idea began forming. The vandalism incident had forced me to see my family dynamic with new clarity. But my parents remained entrenched in their distorted perspective. Perhaps they needed a similar moment of clarity, an undeniable revelation that would make the truth impossible to ignore. With this goal in mind, I contacted Parker Reynolds, a private investigator recommended by my attorney. At our first meeting, I explained what I was looking for. "I need to understand the full extent of my sister's destructive behavior," I said. "I suspect the vandalism of my home isn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern I've been conditioned to ignore or excuse." Parker nodded. "Family cases are always complicated. What specific information are you hoping to uncover?" "Anything that reveals who she really is, beyond the persona my parents have chosen to see. Financial issues, legal problems, relationship patterns, substance abuse. I need to know what I'm dealing with." For the next month, while my home was being restored and Brooke's criminal case moved through the system, Parker conducted his investigation. I told no one about this, not even Jason or Megan. This was a journey I needed to undertake alone. Meanwhile, Brooke was arrested, booked, and released on bail paid by my parents. She was ordered to stay away from me and my property as a condition of her release. My parents called daily, alternating between guilt trips, angry accusations, and tearful pleas for me to drop the charges. I let their calls go to voicemail, listening to their messages but rarely responding. For weeks after hiring him, Parker delivered his report. "You might want to sit down for this," he advised as he placed a thick folder on my kitchen table. What he had uncovered was more disturbing than I had imagined. Brooke's pattern of destructive behavior extended far beyond family dynamics. First, there were the financial crimes. Brooke had opened multiple credit cards in our parents' names, accumulating over $75,000 in debt that they had apparently paid off without reporting the fraud. She had been fired from 3 jobs for stealing, though no charges had been filed because the employers had been paid off, presumably by my parents. Then there were the substance abuse issues. Brooke had 2 DUIs that had somehow never appeared on her record, again likely due to my father's connections in the local legal community. She had been in and out of rehab 3 times in the past 5 years, always checking out against medical advice. Most disturbing were the relationship patterns. An ex-boyfriend had taken out a restraining order against her after she had vandalized his car and apartment in a jealous rage very similar to what she had done to my home. Another ex had recordings of threatening phone calls where Brooke had promised to destroy him for breaking up with her. The final bombshell came near the end of the report. Parker had discovered that over the past year, Brooke had been systematically stealing from my parents' retirement accounts, transferring small amounts regularly to an offshore account in her name. The total now approached $200,000, which explained their increasing financial strain despite their comfortable incomes. They have no idea, do they? I asked Parker. Based on their recent financial decisions, I don't believe so, he confirmed. They've taken out a second mortgage on their home, presumably to cover unexpected expenses, like Brooke's bail, legal fees, and the deductible for my insurance claim. After Parker left, I sat with the information, trying to process what it meant for my family. Brooke wasn't just spoiled or emotionally volatile, she was dangerous, both to herself and others. And my parents' enabling had allowed her destructive behavior to escalate unchecked for years. I considered my options carefully. I could send the report to my parents immediately, but without context, they might dismiss it as an attack on Brooke. I could confront Brooke directly, but that would likely result in more destruction and denial. What I needed was a controlled environment where the truth could be presented comprehensively, with evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. A setting where my parents would be forced to see the reality they had been avoiding for decades. As if on cue, an invitation arrived in the mail, my parents' 40th anniversary celebration, planned for the following month at their country club. The entire extended family would be there, including many of the relatives who had sided with Brooke after the vandalism incident. It would be the perfect opportunity to finally break the cycle of enabling and denial that had poisoned our family for 30 years. Over the next few weeks, I prepared methodically. I organized Parker's findings into a clear, factual presentation, focusing on documented evidence rather than speculation or emotion. I gathered police reports, financial records, medical documents, and testimonials from people who had experienced Brooke's destructive behavior firsthand. I created digital backups of everything, anticipating that Brooke or my parents might attempt to destroy the physical evidence. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation that could be displayed on my laptop if necessary, though I hoped a more private revelation would be possible. As the anniversary party approached, my anxiety increased. Was I doing the right thing? Would this help my family heal? Or would it simply cause more pain? Was I motivated by justice or by decades of resentment? Dr. Foster helped me work through these questions during our sessions. The truth, presented with clarity and without malice, is not something you need to feel guilty about, she assured me. Your parents and sister have chosen to live in denial, and that choice has caused harm to everyone involved, including themselves. The night before the party, Jason came over to help me finalize my preparations. He had been supportive of my plan, though concerned about the toll it might take on me. Are you sure you want to do this alone? He asked as we organized the documents into a portfolio. I could come with you. I need to do this myself, I replied. But thank you for offering. He pulled me into a hug. I'm proud of you, you know. This takes incredible courage. As I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I thought about the long journey that had led to this moment. The years of accepting less than I deserved, of making excuses for inexcusable behavior, of hoping for recognition that never came. Tomorrow would mark the end of that journey and the beginning of something new, whether my family chose to be part of it or not. For the first time in my life, I was taking control of the narrative. And whatever happened at the anniversary party, I knew I would never go back to being the family scapegoat again. The morning of my parents' anniversary celebration dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a navy blue sheath dress, professional but appropriate for the occasion. The portfolio containing the evidence was tucked into a stylish leather tote that matched my shoes, looking like nothing more than a thoughtful anniversary gift. My hands shook slightly as I applied my makeup, a physical manifestation of the anxiety churning inside me. The stakes were enormous. By the end of today, my family dynamic would be irreversibly altered, for better or worse. The country club where the celebration was being held was a testament to my parents' social standing in the community. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the meticulously maintained golf course. About 60 guests had already arrived when I entered. Mostly family members and longtime friends of my parents. Mom spotted me immediately and hurried over, her expression a mixture of surprise and cautious hope. We hadn't spoken in person since the day after the vandalism. "Harper, you came," she said, reaching for a hug that I allowed but didn't return with enthusiasm. "We weren't sure." "I wouldn't miss your anniversary," I replied, the social niceties feeling strange after everything that had happened. "Your father will be so pleased," she continued, glancing around. "He's just greeting the Hendersons. You remember Bill and Patricia?" I nodded, taking the opportunity to survey the room. "No sign of Brooke yet." "Is Brooke coming?" I asked casually. Mom's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, she's running a bit late. She's been under so much stress with this legal business. The doctors have adjusted her medication, and it's making her a bit groggy in the mornings." The familiar excuses, presented as if the legal business wasn't a direct result of Brooke's deliberate actions. Something's never changed. Dad spotted us and made his way over, his greeting similarly tentative but hopeful. "Harper, good to see you." The initial awkwardness gradually eased as I circulated through the party, greeting relatives and family friends. Many seemed relieved that I was there, perhaps hoping that my presence signaled a reconciliation. A few gave me knowing looks or squeezed my arm in silent support. Apparently, not everyone had been convinced by Brooke's version of events. An hour into the celebration, Brooke finally arrived, making a characteristically dramatic entrance. She wore a dress that was slightly too formal for the occasion, her makeup heavy and her movements somewhat erratic. The signs of substance abuse were clear to me now that I knew what to look for. She faltered momentarily when she saw me, then plastered on a wide, fake smile and made a beeline for our parents, embracing them effusively and presenting them with an elaborately wrapped package. From across the room, I could see Mom patting her back soothingly, as if Brooke were the one who needed comfort in this situation. I maintained my distance, watching as Brooke worked the room, playing the role of devoted daughter to perfection. She laughed too loudly at jokes, touched people's arms when she spoke to them, and kept glancing my way to ensure I was witnessing her performance. The luncheon was served. A formal affair with multiple courses and flowing champagne. I was seated at a table with cousins and aunts, deliberately separated from the immediate family table where my parents sat with Brooke and my grandparents. After the meal, the toasts began. Various friends and family members stood to share memories and congratulations. When it was Brooke's turn, she approached the microphone with exaggerated care, champagne glass in hand. "To the best parents anyone could ask for," she began, her words slightly slurred. "You've always been there for me, through thick and thin. You've shown me what unconditional love truly means." She paused for effect, then continued with a glance in my direction. "Not everyone appreciates the wonderful family we have. Some of us think we're too good for family gatherings unless there's an opportunity to show off our fancy careers and perfect homes." An uncomfortable murmur ran through the crowd. This was meant to be a toast to our parents, not a platform for airing grievances. But Mom and Dad have always taught us the value of forgiveness, Brooke continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension. So I forgive my sister for her snobbery and her vindictiveness. That's what family does. She raised her glass higher. To 40 more years with the most generous, loving parents in the world. I love you both so much. The applause was polite but muted. The guests clearly uncomfortable with the inappropriate nature of her toast. Dad leaned over to whisper something in her ear as she sat down, but she brushed him off with a wave of her hand. Then came the moment that crystallized my resolve. Still buzzing from her toast, Brooke stood again and made an announcement. And I have wonderful news. Mom and Dad have generously offered to let me use their lake house for the summer while I, quote, figure things out. Isn't that amazing? The lake house. The beautiful property in New Hampshire that I had helped my parents renovate 2 years ago, donating hundreds of hours of professional design work as their anniversary gift. The place they had promised would always be open to both their daughters equally. I watched my parents' faces, saw their weak smiles and nods of confirmation. In that moment, any doubts I had about my plan evaporated. This pattern would never end unless I ended it. I waited until the formal program concluded and guests began mingling again. Then I approached my parents' table, portfolio in hand. Could I speak with you both privately? I asked. I have an anniversary gift I'd like to share with you. They exchanged glances, clearly wary but unwilling to create a scene. Of course, Dad said. We can use the club manager's office. He offered it earlier if we needed a quiet moment. Brooke should come too. I added. This concerns her as well. Brooke's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but curiosity won out. Fine, she said, gathering her purse. The manager's office was a wood-paneled room with a large desk and several comfortable chairs. I closed the door behind us and took a deep breath. Before I give you my gift, I began. I want to say that what I'm about to share comes from a place of concern, not revenge. I've spent weeks considering whether this is the right course of action, and I believe it is. What are you talking about? Brooke demanded, her speech still slightly slurred. I opened my portfolio and removed a bound document, handing it to my father. This is a comprehensive report on Brooke's activities over the past 5 years, compiled by a licensed private investigator. You had me investigated, Brooke shrieked, lunging for the document. Dad held it away from her, his expression darkening. Harper, this is completely inappropriate, Mom said. Whatever game you're playing, this is not the time or place. This isn't a game, I replied calmly. This is about facing reality before it's too late. Did you know that Brooke has been systematically stealing from your retirement accounts? That's a lie, Brooke shouted, her face contorted with rage. I removed a folder of financial records from my portfolio. These are statements from your accounts, showing regular transfers to an offshore account in Brooke's name. The total is just under $200,000. Dad's face paled as he scanned the documents. These are confidential. How did you get these? That's your question? Not whether they're accurate. I asked incredulously. They're fake, Brooke insisted. She's making this up to turn you against me because she's always been jealous. I continued methodically presenting the evidence. The credit card fraud, the DUIs, the restraining order, the pattern of theft and destruction that had escalated over years while my parents looked the other way. As the evidence mounted, my parents' denials became weaker. Mom began crying quietly, while Dad's face cycled through anger, disbelief, and finally, a dawning horror. Brooke's strategy evolved as she realized denial wasn't working. She tried minimizing. It wasn't that much money. Justifying, you owe me after everything I've been through, and finally, when those failed, attacking. You think you're so perfect, don't you? She spat at me. Her composure completely shattered. Little Miss Perfect with her perfect career and her perfect house that I should have trashed more thoroughly when I had the chance. The admission hung in the air between us. Until that moment, Brooke had maintained to our parents that the vandalism had been an emotional outburst, not a premeditated act. "You planned it?" Mom whispered, shock evident in her voice. "Of course I planned it," Brooke shouted, past caring about the impression she was making. She deserved it, flaunting her success. Acting like she's better than me. You've always taken her side. The absurdity of this statement might have been comical if the situation weren't so tragic. My parents looked genuinely confused. "Taken her side?" Dad repeated. "Brooke, we've supported you through everything. We've paid your bills, covered your mistakes, defended you to everyone." "It's never enough," Brooke cried. "Nothing is ever enough." She lunged for the portfolio still in my hands, but I stepped back quickly. In her intoxicated state, she lost her balance and crashed into the desk, sending a lamp crashing to the floor. The noise attracted attention from outside. There was a knock at the door, and my Uncle David peeked in. "Everything okay in here?" We heard a crash. The tableau must have been quite a sight. Brooke disheveled and clearly agitated, Mom crying, Dad holding financial statements with a stunned expression, and me standing calmly in the center of the storm. "We're having a family discussion," I said. "Could you give us a few more minutes?" But more relatives had gathered outside the door, drawn by the commotion. My Aunt Susan pushed her way in, followed by several cousins. "What's going on?" Susan demanded. "Richard, Catherine, what's happening?" Before anyone could respond, Brooke launched into a tirade. "Harper's trying to turn everyone against me. She's made up lies about me stealing and drinking." "They're not lies, Brooke," I said quietly. "And deep down, you know that." "Stealing?" my grandfather asked, his voice sharp despite his 80 years. "Stealing what?" The situation was spiraling beyond my careful plan. What I had intended as a private confrontation was becoming a public exposure. But perhaps that was necessary. The family's collective denial had enabled Brooke as much as my parents' individual blind spots. "Brooke has been taking money from Mom and Dad's retirement accounts," I explained, keeping my voice level. "Among other concerning behaviors. That's why you've been remortgaging the house," my Aunt Gloria said to my father, the pieces falling into place. We wondered. More family members crowded into the doorway, the anniversary celebration now completely derailed. Snippets of information circulated through the group. Each revelation met with gasps or murmurs of confirmation from those who had suspected something wasn't right. Brooke, realizing she was losing control of the narrative, resorted to her final tactic: the dramatic exit. "I don't have to listen to this," she declared, grabbing her purse. "None of you have ever understood me." She pushed her way through the gathered relatives, nearly knocking over my elderly grandmother in her haste to escape. In the stunned silence that followed, my father looked down at the financial statements still in his hands, then at the investigator's report on the desk. "Is all of this true?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Every word," I confirmed. "I've verified it independently. I'm sorry to do this today, but you needed to know." "Why?" Mom asked, tears streaming down her face. "Why would she do this to us after everything we've done for her?" It was my cousin Michael, a psychologist, who answered. "Because everything you've done for her has taught her that she doesn't have to be responsible for her actions. You've been enabling her addiction and her personality disorder, not helping her." The harsh truth landed like a physical blow. My parents seemed to age years in minutes, the weight of their decades-long mistake finally settling on their shoulders. The extended family began to disperse, murmuring promises to call later and awkward congratulations on the anniversary. The celebration was effectively over, replaced by the somber reality of a family crisis too long ignored. When only immediate family remained, Dad sank into a chair, looking utterly defeated. "What do we do now?" he asked. The question directed at no one in particular. "You get her real help," I said gently. Not the kind that protects her from consequences, but the kind that forces her to face them. And you protect yourselves, your finances, and your future. We failed her, Mom whispered. We failed both of you. I reached out and took her hand, offering the first genuine connection we'd had in months. It's not too late to change course. For any of us. The aftermath of the anniversary party was both more difficult and more healing than I could have anticipated. For 2 weeks, my parents went silent, not returning my calls or responding to my messages. I understood they needed time to process everything, to grieve the fantasy they had constructed around Brooke, and to reckon with their role in enabling her destructive behavior. During that time, I focused on self-care and rebuilding my business momentum, which had inevitably suffered during the weeks of family crisis. The renovations on my vandalized home were nearly complete, with only a few finishing touches remaining. Each repair felt symbolic, a tangible representation of my own healing process. 17 days after the anniversary party, my father appeared at my door unannounced. He looked haggard, with new lines around his eyes and gray hair that seemed to have multiplied overnight. "Can I come in?" he asked, his usual confidence replaced by hesitation. I stepped aside to let him enter, leading him to the newly restored living room where we sat across from each other in uncomfortable silence. "Your home looks beautiful," he finally said. "You've done an amazing job with the repairs." "Thank you," I replied, waiting for him to reach the real purpose of his visit. He cleared his throat. "Harper, I owe you an apology. Not just for what happened after the vandalism, but for a lifetime of not seeing you clearly." The words I had waited decades to hear landed softly in the space between us. "After you left the party," he continued, "your mother and I spent hours going through that report. Then we started looking at our own records, our own memories. The pattern was so obvious once we allowed ourselves to see it." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "We've been in family therapy, trying to understand how we could have been so blind for so long. The therapist says we created a dynamic where Brooke was perpetually the victim and you were expected to be the strong one who never needed anything." "That sounds accurate," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. "We've also been meeting with financial advisors and attorneys," he added. "The situation with our accounts was even worse than your investigator discovered. We've had to make some difficult decisions." He explained that they had frozen all accounts Brooke had access to and filed fraud reports with their banks. They had consulted an addiction specialist and were planning an intervention to get Brooke into a long-term residential treatment program that focused on both substance abuse and behavioral issues. "She won't go willingly," I said, having witnessed enough of Brooke's manipulations to know she would resist anything that restricted her freedom or access to substances. "No, she won't." Dad agreed. "That's why we've set firm boundaries for the first time. She can choose the treatment program, or she can face criminal charges for the financial fraud. And we won't be bailing her out of the vandalism charges either way." The resolve in his voice was new, and I felt a cautious hope that real change might be possible. "Your mother wanted to come today, but she's still struggling," he admitted. "She feels like she failed both her children, and the guilt is overwhelming." "I'd like to talk to her when she's ready," I said. "There's healing needed on all sides." Dad nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "We're so proud of you, Harper. Not just for your success, but for your strength in forcing us to see the truth. It couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I confirmed. "But it was necessary." 2 days later, I met both my parents for coffee at a neutral location. Mom broke down crying almost immediately, apologizing through her tears for years of overlooking my achievements and expecting me to always understand, always forgive, always accommodate. "We put so much energy into trying to fix Brooke that we never appreciated that you didn't need fixing," she said, clutching my hand across the table. "You were our rock. And we took that for granted." Over the following weeks, our relationship began a tentative rebuilding. There were difficult conversations, moments of backsliding into old patterns, and the inevitable awkwardness of establishing new, healthier dynamics. But there was also a growing honesty between us that had never existed before. The intervention with Brooke went as expected, with dramatic accusations, manipulation attempts, and finally, faced with unyielding boundaries from our parents, grudging acceptance of the treatment option. She left for a facility in Arizona the following day, scheduled to remain for at least 6 months. I maintained my distance from that process, supporting my parents' efforts, but recognizing that my presence would only complicate an already volatile situation. My own healing couldn't be dependent on Brooke's recovery or acknowledgement of the harm she had caused. 6 months after the confrontation at the anniversary party, my parents invited me to dinner at their home. It was the first time we had gathered there since before the vandalism incident. "We have some updates," Dad said as we sat around the dining room table, the atmosphere more relaxed than it had been in years. They shared that Brooke had completed the initial phase of her treatment program and was now in a transitional facility with more independence, but continued therapy and monitoring. She was working part-time at the center and, according to her counselors, showing genuine progress in accepting responsibility for her actions. "She's asked to make amends to you," Mom said carefully, "but her therapists and ours agree that should only happen if and when you're ready." "I'm not ready," I admitted. "Maybe someday, but not yet." "We understand," Dad assured me. "Your boundaries will be respected." They also shared that they had sold the lake house and their second car, downsizing to repair some of the financial damage and fund Brooke's treatment. The second mortgage on their home would take years to pay off, but they had a plan in place. "We're adjusting to a new reality," Mom explained. "It's humbling, but also freeing in a way." As we finished dinner, I noticed something significant. Not once had they made excuses for Brooke or suggested that I needed to forgive and forget. The change was profound. In my own life, the healing continued as well. My business flourished, with the Architectural Digest feature bringing national attention to my work. Jason and I grew closer, our relationship deepening through the crisis. Megan remained my steadfast friend, always ready with perspective and humor when family issues threatened to overwhelm me. The final phase of my home restoration was completed exactly 1 year after the vandalism. I decided to mark the occasion with a small gathering, much more intimate than the ill-fated housewarming that had preceded the destruction. As I welcomed Jason, Megan, and a few close colleagues into my beautifully restored space, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my life. The house was once again a showcase of my design vision, but it was also something more, a symbol of resilience, of the power of truth, and of my own worth that no longer depended on family validation. Later that evening, as my guests enjoyed dessert in the dining room, I stepped into my home office for a moment of quiet reflection. On the wall hung a simple framed quote that Dr. Foster had shared during one of our sessions: "The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable." How accurate that had proven to be. The path to this new reality had been painful, messy, and at times heartbreaking. But standing on the other side, I wouldn't change my decision to finally speak the truth that had been ignored for decades. My relationship with my parents continued to evolve, sometimes stumbling, but always with more honesty than before. Whether Brooke and I would ever rebuild any kind of relationship remained an open question, one I no longer felt pressured to answer. What I knew with certainty was that I had broken free from the role assigned to me since childhood. I was neither the perpetual forgiver nor the unappreciated achiever. I was simply Harper, worthy of recognition, respect, and love, not despite my strength, but because of it. As I rejoined my chosen family in the dining room, I silently acknowledged how far I'd come. The journey wasn't over, but for perhaps the first time in my life, I was traveling it on my own terms, with boundaries intact and truth as my compass. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who couldn't see harmful patterns? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing in your truth, while difficult, can ultimately lead to healing. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. And remember that you deserve to be valued for exactly who you are.